Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow and welcome to another episode of Tech Interviews. On this week's show, we're going to be taking a look at an area of technology that's rapidly developing, but it's something that's relatively new to me. And I think perhaps quite a lot of people who listen and watch this show, it'll be a topic that you've heard about, but don't necessarily understand and not necessarily sure about the impact it's going to have on the way that we deliver services and applications into our enterprise in the future. So for this week's topic, we're going to be taking a look at the world of serverless. And to help me to do that, I've been joined this week by Ezhilarasi Chezhiyan. Essie, how are you doing? Nice to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for having me on this show. I'm doing great.
Well, welcome to Tech Interviews. Look, before we jump into this kind of topic of serverless and what that means and set some context around it for our viewers and listeners, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, who it is, who you are, what you've done previously and how you've ended up kind of working in this space?
Yeah, I have 10 plus years of experience into IT field. I started my career with an IT legend Infosys as an technical trainer, and then got my expertise into building a number of applications for various domains, for various organizations. And when I joined Covey.co 3 years back, I was given the responsibility to technically lead the product Serverless 360, a tool that has been crafted to complement the Azure portal, in operations and support perspective of serverless services. So that is when my exploration into serverless started. And from then point on, I had to represent my product in international conferences. I had to develop my expertise into the serverless space so that I suggest the right solutions to the Azure solution architects who play critical role in building serverless applications in their organizations. And the journey has been really great with a lot of knowledge, and I'm happy to share this with this community.
Yeah, and actually that kind of relatively recent experience for you, I think, it's hugely valuable to the kind of the way we want to cover the topic today, because I think for a lot of people, they're going to be hearing about serverless maybe for the first time, or have heard of serverless and are looking at this as a way of understanding what that means, what that might mean to them. So it's interesting that you've spent time talking at conferences around exactly that topic. How people can start to develop and understand what serverless looks like and what serverless means to them. So why don't we start there actually? So I keep using this phrase serverless. I've got no idea what it really means. I've just heard it. So why don't we start with that? Why don't you give us an idea of when we talk about serverless, what does that mean, and how is that different from the way that we perhaps look at architecture today?
That's a brilliant start for this session. What is serverless? So as the name says, it's definitely not no servers because there are servers, but I need not worry about them. So that is what serverless cloud computing model helps us with. It completely abstracts away most of the server operations to the cloud service provider. Say if I choose Microsoft Azure as my cloud service provider, then they take care of managing or operational overheads on my server, and all that I have to worry about is my core business logic that I have to satisfy to deliver my customer obsessive features. So this way, a lot of overhead in managing my servers or the pre-computing cost. That is, let us take an example to understand this better. Say in the classic way of building applications, if I have to host an application and make it available for my end users, I should have a server. So in olden days, it was a dedicated server that I would have physically present in front of me, wherein I will have an IIS where I would host my application, I would make it available for the end customers. So here, if we look into whether I have a traffic or not, I need to retain the server so that my web application is rendered to my customers. But that is no longer a requirement. Like with the introduction of infrastructure as a service and PaaS as a service, when cloud computing came into picture, so this has been eradicated a bit. Like I started using and shared resource from the cloud. But now the serverless introduction brings in a massive difference in the way we build applications. It's more like kids putting together the Lego blocks and get your building built. So that is how you're building your application now by adapting to serverless computing. So all that I have to worry about is what is the business logic I need to achieve. And this business logic can be executed in the serverless service, and you get the service rendered to your customers in a matter of few minutes without any pre-computing cost associated. So when a user uses my website, that is when I am getting billed. Only for the number of executions that my application is going to make, only so much is what I am going to pay. And it is completely event driven. That is, say, today, if I have one user, my application would give an assured performance. Tomorrow, if I anticipate a sudden spike, say it's a billion day deal for an e-commerce website, and all of a sudden I expect a sudden inflow of a huge number of users to my website, I need not worry about it at all. These serverless services are equipped to auto scale based on the event that is driving them. So I just focus on the business, pay only for what I use, and it's completely auto scalable. So these are certain popular capabilities that make the serverless the most trending topic in our industry now.
So what was really good about that answer was, as you were talking, I was writing down questions, and within 10 seconds you'd answered the question. So one of my questions was actually going to be, as you was talking about that kind of idea of scaling. So, and I think a lot of the things that we are seeing inside of the enterprise today has been driven by the way that we look at public cloud. And I think that the requirements on a lot of enterprises and people who are architecting solutions inside of the enterprises, we want our enterprise applications to act like the public cloud. This idea of transformation, so we need to be able to respond really rapidly to changing customer requirements. I think that's a great example, there that traditionally we would look at that and we would worry about how do we scale lots and lots of servers, and how do we scale our application accordingly. From the way you describe that, it sounds as though serverless has been designed with that exactly in mind. It's exactly that function in mind, that the focus should be on just the business logic. The focus should be on the outcome, and actually less of a focus on how the back-end infrastructure is delivered. Is that accurate? Is that the thinking behind serverless?
Exactly. They are trying to reduce the overhead on building the applications. Still, you get to deliver an reliable, highly performant solution, and you just pay only for what you are using. So these are the key criteria behind the serverless services.
Yeah, so it's technology and commercial flexibility, I suppose. That idea that I'm just going to pay for it as I need it. That's increasingly attractive. And I think, without using a phrase that feels so overused, is the idea of in these uncertain times, that kind of commercial flexibility is hugely valuable as well.
Exactly.
So maybe just to kind of dig into a little bit more. So obviously we're talking about serverless as kind of this idea that we are looking at kind of functions and capability, and we're designing business logic. What are some of the other problems that's addressing? How would people, maybe without serverless, how would people be delivering that? What are the difficulties in the way that designing these kind of modern, scalable and flexible applications? What are some of the other challenges that serverless is addressing?
Say the capabilities that serverless services provide can be directly fit into your business requirements. So let me pick up examples to help you understand these better. Say in an e-commerce scenario, wherein order management is a critical component. So every customer submits a new order, and that has to be picked up and then processed by my business logic. So here, what is critical is an queue architecture. A data structure queue is very critical. So if I have to custom build it, I will have to take care of a number of capabilities by myself, which is not quite possible, like not feasible when you have to deliver it fast to the market. So in such cases, if you pick up already available architecture solutions from the serverless services. Like Microsoft Azure offers service bus queues and topics which can be really fit into your real-time business need. Are there any business exceptions? You need to dead letter an order which needs to be custom handled. You have this readily available in an queue as a service. So you can just consume the service without any pre-computation cost, like you just consume it and then start using it. Another very good example would be a Logic app. So as the name Logic app says, it has a number of connections readily available. Say for example, if my business workflow needs to send an email to my stakeholders. So if this is a part of my business logic, I need not write my custom code to implement the SMTP logic to send out an email. It is available to me as a connector. I just take it, plug it into my workflow, define it, and then get it working. So it's as simple as this to build an application. So we are trying to reduce the requirement for a skill set to build a real smart application. Instead, you start relying on like pre-qualified connectors which has been developed with utmost care and which guarantee you 100% reliability, scalability, and you just consume it, and this will drastically improve the rapid development. Like you can build your applications really faster and you can get to the market sooner, which is very critical.
Yeah, and so this sounds because again you did that thing there where you took the question that I had written down and answered it before I got to ask it. So I'm going to ask it anyway. So this sounds very much like lots and lots of these kind of pre-packaged workflows, for want of a better phrase, that lots of these already exist. So I mean, I'm assuming you have the ability to customize and build maybe more custom ones. But it sounds very much like, you know, I think you talked about, sorry, I can't remember whether we talked about this already on the show, or we talked about this kind of while we were chatting before we recorded, but this idea of kind of almost like Lego. So, you know, we're building our applications with these pre-existing blocks and kind of just sticking them together to meet, as you said, kind of that idea of a business workflow. I mean, is it really that simple, or am I oversimplifying it?
It is really that simple. Like, for example, say if I am building a digital marketing product, okay, for my requirement is to every tweet that I post in my Twitter account, I need to understand how is it going to behave to my audience. So an analysis of it before it gets posted. So this sounds like a complex requirement wherein I will have to understand the Twitter API on getting the tweet content. I need to use a text analytics tool which has got the artificial intelligence to understand the sentiment of it. So if I have to do it on my own by writing my custom code, I need to understand the APIs involved in it, and I will have to authenticate to them, get it done. But instead, if you are using a serverless service like Logic app, you have the Twitter connector readily available. All that you have to do is plug it in, connect it with your account credentials. That is it. It takes care of, it completely encapsulates all the learnings that is required to get this working. Like without writing a single line of code, I'm achieving connectivity to my Twitter account just by plugging in a connector from Logic app. And the next step, if I need an analytic solution, that is also available. A cognitive services API is available as a connector. All that I will have to do is pick up the dynamic content that retrieves a tweet, pass it on to this connector, get the sentiment score, and show a decision, use a decision-making control to give away the verdict whether the tweet will work good or not. So it's as simple as that. So you can just visualize like you are plugging in the services and you get things sorted out in a minute, and you can see your application running in a minute.
So you know, so something that sounds as simple as that, and the idea that actually we can generate kind of applications that quickly, is there limitations to where we can go currently, perhaps with serverless? You know, so is there things that it's designed that it's good at versus things that actually you right now wouldn't be able to do with that kind of serverless architecture?
Say it also allows customization, Paul. Like if you have any legacy code that needs to be moved into serverless, so you can you have a choice to either keep it on-prem and make your application hybrid. So a certain legacy code would be highly, it's very specific to the business, and you really do not want to move it to the cloud. You can still have it in your on-premises, expose it to the cloud through an serverless service called Relay, and connect it to the rest of your serverless components. So the decision is quite simple. Like, you will have to identify your goals. You will have to define what are all the components that needs to be moved into the cloud and what you want to retain on premises. You can either go with a completely serverless application, or you can choose to be an hybrid application by retaining your legacy code in your on-premise and expose it to the cloud.
So this would be a good example of a way of modernizing almost kind of a traditional on-premises application. So something that maybe is big and complex on-prem, you want to be able to publish out some kind of more customer-friendly features, or something you need to be able to deliver quickly. Is that an example of how people are using this kind of technology then, as a way of giving it kind of cloud-like capabilities without having to hugely re-architect the kind of maybe a big complex ERP type solution?
Exactly, yes. So why people choose to go serverless, the reasons could be like to reduce the operational cost. So like, instead of having my whole huge application within my premise and then taking all the overhead of maintaining it, I can fragment it. Like, I can decouple it into smaller components, choose the right serverless service to solve each of the components, completely decouple them, and then move them into the parts into the appropriate serverless services. So that is how I see the trend in going ahead with serverless services now.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. So you see that potentially its next phase of development is maybe, rather than people necessarily building kind of cloud native logic based applications, is actually they will be using it as a way of enhancing their capabilities, maybe with more traditional on-premise applications. Is that that's more the work you're seeing now, and how you expect to develop?
Exactly. In the next 10 years, I can find a lot of scope for people going serverless, or moving a part of their applications into serverless computing for reasons like reducing the operational costs, to reduce the time to market, or to improve its efficiency. So these are certain reasons why we find people moving ahead with serverless.
So, I suppose that leads on to kind of my next question, really, which is: so if I'm listening to this as a decision maker, or an application architect, or a head of IT inside of an enterprise, and I'm kind of listening to this and thinking, well, this serverless stuff sounds easy to develop. I like the commercial and the technical flexibility that it brings. What would be the kind of things then that you would be looking at internally inside of your organisation? What are some of the kind of things that you would look for that would make good serverless technology type projects? Is there a particular workload you would look at, particular requirements, other things I suppose that stand out to you as really good examples right now of things that absolutely should be considered for, if you're thinking of doing something, consider serverless. Sorry, that was a really long question. I hope that made sense.
Should I rephrase this question? Like, what are all the how should I approach this going serverless phase? Like, what are all the steps should I have to follow?
If you can, if you can do a clearer version of my question, that'd be great. But yeah, I suppose I'm looking at what would those next steps be? How would I identify a good serverless candidate inside of an enterprise, and then what would be the next steps for how I'd go about delivering that?
Yeah, that's great. Like, first step that I will have to perform in my organization is define your goals. Like, identify whether are there good candidates for going ahead with serverless computing. So any particular application can be converted into or moved into a serverless service, but it requires a very clear planning. So what is the reason behind you going ahead with serverless computing? Is it your intention is to lower your operational costs, or you have a bunch of legacy systems and you have a small team to manage it? You need to find an easier way to deal with this huge application with a smaller team. then serverless is a very good option. Or you need to seamlessly improve the performance of your application irrespective of your traffic that you can anticipate. So when you define your goals, the next step is to identify the technology. So you can choose between the cloud service providers. Say if you are choosing Microsoft Azure, then the next step is to educate your team on this. So here I would like to emphasize to make use of your existing team, because they would have the adequate knowledge on your business. So if you pick up, or if you decide to outsource this migration to another team, it's going to be hard for you to first let them understand what your business is. Instead, make use of your existing team. And serverless is very easy to scale up on. So with that assurance, you can start encouraging your team to scale up on the serverless services. How? You can encourage them to participate in conferences that are dedicated for serverless technologies. Like Integrate is one conference we at Covey.co organize, which is very popular among the serverless computing space, which happens once in a year. And you get updates from the Microsoft Azure team itself on the technologies and how they would benefit your organizations. And there are other conferences conducted by Microsoft itself, like Ignite. And depending on your the service provider choice, you will have to focus on the conferences conducted by them. You should encourage your team members to participate in meetups. Say we have a lot of community presence. We as a Serverless 360 or the Covey.co, the organization has a great community presence. We have rich technical contents that would help our target audience enable themselves on Microsoft Azure serverless services. So you can choose such a reliable source of the technology and scale up your team on the selected technology. And once you're clear with your goal and your team has equipped themselves in the technology, the next step is to create a proof of concept. So for any problem, you might find a number of solutions. And this proof of concept is not going to be your production ready product. So you should not be spending so much of time into that. It is just to make sure that the solution that you have identified is going to meet your goal or not. So you can identify a number of combinations, try them out, and then choose the one that best suits your intent or the goal that you want to achieve. And the next step is very critical. You need to optimize the solution that you have identified to work. So here is where we need to take advantage of the cloud. So as we were talking, I was talking about number of services like service bus queues, logic apps, functions. So each one of them have a real significance on where they have to be used. Say when I have a necessity for decoupling my applications, which is very ideal when you are working within serverless services. So every component should be decoupled so that they are individually scalable and individually manageable. So you will have to look for opportunities wherein we can bring in services like queues that can help me in decoupling. So let me help you with an example to understand this better. So the same e-commerce order processing scenario. So I have a website which is hosted in an Azure web app. And through the website, the customer is going to submit an order. So for every order, this website will push a message into the queue and it will forget about it. And I have a logic app which will listen to this queue, pick up each order and then process. So here, my order processing application, which is there in my logic app, is completely decoupled from my external website, which is facing my customer. And who is doing this decoupling for me is the service bus queue. So I will have to look for serverless services like this, which can help me in decoupling my complete architecture. And I need to adapt to event-driven architecture so that I build a reactive solution. Because the customers that we deal with in present day scenarios are highly demanding. So they want things to be done. That is, the website has to react to their intention. So that is how we need to build our application. So go ahead, consume event driven architecture using resources like event grid in Microsoft Azure. So event grid can be a wonderful candidate which can connect any service with another service in Microsoft Azure. And say certain real-time applications will be really complex. For example, let us pick up an application like Uber, wherein they have the taxis running across the world, like there are Uber taxis across the world, and I need a centralized management system which is expected to ingest millions of data every minute from all the devices that are spread across the world. So instead of building a custom solution which is expected to seamlessly scale and ingest millions of events per second, wherein I will have to take the overhead of managing its operational costs, instead go ahead and then consume a reliable service like Event Hub from Microsoft Azure. So which guarantees you of 99.9% availability and seamless processing of millions of events per second. So choosing the right service would help us build really smart application in no matter of time.
So that's so I was going to say, because what's really interesting in all of that as well is, and you can kind of see and understand the power of this kind of idea of decoupling, because as you decouple and separate those services out, then of course that gives you much more. We talked about kind of speed of development, didn't we, earlier on, and that idea of the ability to just develop portions of your application, because I think one of the big challenges that, particularly if you've got a big back-end enterprise application, is that any change you make to that application can affect so many different components. The ability to kind of decouple those, develop one piece, scale pieces separately, you can see some huge value in that. So I suppose that kind of just leads me on to maybe my final question, because I appreciate we're kind of running low on recording time now, but as we kind of we get to the end of our question, so all of this stuff sounds really straightforward, and of course it does, partly because you've had experience of doing this. So I suppose the way where you present it today now does seem really straightforward to you. But from your point as an organisation and what you do as a company, how are you helping? What kind of tools, what kind of services do you guys offer that can help customers who may be listening to this for the first time and say, well, I like the idea of it. It sounds dead straightforward, but I might just want a little bit of help. Is there ways that you guys can help? Is there tools and technologies you make available that could help somebody start on a project like this?
Yes. So as we understood till now, serverless is a real easy technology to adapt to, and you can build real smart applications with the help of serverless services. But once your application in production, what is challenging is supporting them in real-time production. How do you serve your customer requests? How do you enable your operations or support team to deal with your serverless application that is in production? So as we were talking about, most of the server-side operations are completely abstracted from us when we choose a serverless service. So this becomes a little hard for my operations or support team to understand where did my serverless application fail when they have to support their customer. Say when the customer comes and says that my order has been failed or has not been delivered. So it is a bit hard for an operations or support team to locate where exactly did it fail and how do I support this customer. That is where a tool like Serverless 360 would come into picture. So Serverless 360 has got a complete tool set that can complement the Azure portal. That is, when I say complement the Azure portal, whatever you find it hard in the Azure portal which you cannot locate. Say I have a message that has got dead lettered, which means an order from a customer has gone unprocessed. So he is not going to get the item delivered. So how do I view this message? How do I make sure that this order is pushed back into my queue so that my order processing system will take it and then process? You find the solution in Serverless 360. So that is how we have crafted this tool with the exact tool set that will help your operations or support team to carry out their day in and day out activities. So you have dashboards that will help you spot any failure. You have end-to-end message tracking, which will help you locate where your application has failed, which has got reprocessing capabilities that will help you restore your business without any manual intervention as well.
So, well, and it's interesting, of course, you describe kind of a product that your company has there in Serverless 360, because actually, while we were talking about this and we were talking about the simplicity, what hadn't crossed my mind was how do you keep an eye on this? Because as these solutions scale and they automate a lot of their kind of scaling, as mere helpless human beings, that must be really tricky for us to keep on top of. So, so that sounds like a really helpful tool. And I'm assuming as a kind of on a wider basis as an organisation, if people are looking for help and advice on how to deliver this kind of stuff, that's also something you guys can do?
Yes, so observing the current phase of industry, many are in the learning phase in adopting to serverless. So with our learnings in this space, we do offer help them choose the right solution to fit in their serverless application architecture. Yes, to an extent, we do support them build the right service along with the tool set to manage and monitor them in production.
So, Ezhi, look, as we it's reach the end of our recording time here. So, if people, because I've learned an awful lot just kind of listening to you for the last 30 minutes. Is if people want to find out more about serverless or how good learning resources, how they can find out more about kind of the tool sets that you guys offer, or maybe how they can even come and hunt you down online to ask you questions. What's a good way to follow up with you?
Yeah, and so in social media, you can identify us as Serverless 360, and we have a dedicated website, serverless360.com, wherein we have a rich source of blogs on the technical topics that will help you enable yourself on the serverless services. And you can also identify the product capabilities, where does our product fit into your business, and we offer a 15-day free trial for you to experience the product. While you are in the free trial, if you need any support, you can reach out to us at support@serverless360.com. Myself and my team would be very happy to support you on this.
Okay, well, that sounds great. I think it's been a fascinating introduction to a topic, and I think actually in that section where you gave kind of the steps that people can take, that's perhaps been the most in-depth section of next steps that I think we've had on the show. So I think certainly there are plenty for people to consider, plenty for people to think about. I'll make sure kind of contact details and where they can find the tooling, etc., goes in the show notes. But Ezhi, look, for today, thanks for being on Tech Interviews. Really enjoyed what you've shared. I think that's been really useful, certainly for me. So I at least know something about serverless now. So hey, thanks for being on the show, and look forward to having you back on some point in the future.
Yes, sure, Paul. It was great talking to you, meeting you on this show today. And serverless being my personally favorite topic, I really enjoyed sharing my learnings in this space with you all.
And I think we'll probably have people asking, how do I get hold of a badge that says Cloud for All so that I can wear that? So Ezhi, look, thanks for being on Tech Interviews, and we'll speak again soon. Thank
you so much. And how to get this badges? By talking for serverless in conferences.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed that. For show notes, pop over to techstringy.com. We'll also find all of our previous Tech Interviews episodes. If you've got an idea for a show or would like to appear as a guest, then why not email me at podcast@techstringy.com. If you want to make sure you catch the next Tech Interviews episode, then why not subscribe? You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, or you can subscribe in all good homes of podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Spotify. So until next time, thanks for watching.